Hello everybody, greetings from Nanjing in China. Today I'm standing in front of a very interesting estate. This estate today is the museum commemorating the Taiping Rebellion. It's the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom Museum. But this same estate, or roundabouts here, was also the estate that belonged to the first Ming Emperor of China, Zhu Yuanzhang, before he became emperor. So he left from here, to go out for those wars that eventually he beat the Yuan Dynasty. And I'm here to talk about the Ming Dynasty. Okay, so there's a lot to say on that front, but just a little bit about the Taiping Rebellion itself. I learned the Taiping Rebellion as just one line in the textbook. I had, my outside of China. So it's interesting that when we read about Chinese history, there's more talked about the Boxer Rebellion in Beijing than about the Taiping Rebellion. But when you visit this museum, you realize that the Taiping Rebellion represented a very important social, military, and economic force in China in its time, and a counter against the Qing Dynasty that almost tore the whole country up and created another economic system south of the Yangtze River. In fact, Nanjing is just south. The Yangtze River is just north of here. When you visit this museum, you realize that over a 13-year period that the Taiping Rebellion created an economy with its own money, with its own commercial papers, with its own social mores, rules, and even economic reports on exports to the West that was as substantial as that of the entire Qing Dynasty. And it took the Qing Dynasty, all of those 13 years to figure it out, and then to start sending soldiers down to cross the river, which is in itself a feat at that time, and also to buy military equipment, because the Qing Dynasty said we have nothing to buy from the West, from the same Western arms dealers as the Taiping Rebellion military bought from. In fact, this was also the house of one of the generals of the Taiping Rebellion. And to think that the Taiping Rebellion was started by this crazy guy, his name is Hong Xiu Zheng, who failed the imperial exam many times, and went crazy. And in a dream, he thought that he was the brother of Jesus Christ, no less. Okay, and by that time, Christianity had been spreading around in China, and then you had variations of it, like the version that this amazing guy, proposed, and then created an entire ecosystem around that. But I'm not here to talk about Hong Xiu Zheng, because that's a story in itself. Now, this same estate was the emperor of China, emperor of the Ming Dynasty, Zhu Yuanzhang's estate before he became emperor. And so what I want to talk to you today is about the things that I've learned from the Ming Dynasty that I actually see as parallels today. Okay, now I want to leave what I want to say open-ended, okay, without having to make any judgments, but hear me out and give me your feedback and your thoughts. So today I want to talk about 5 things, or 5 parallels that I see in the Ming Dynasty, in the first 50 years or so of the Ming Dynasty, and what I see today. So the first thing is that the history or the lifetime of Zhu Yuanzhang himself. This is a man who started life poverty-stricken. Okay, he was really at the bottom of the economic rung, and China itself, this whole area in Nanjing, in the south of China, was absolutely devastated in economic terms. And so, what did he do? He joined a monastery, because the thinking at that time was that if you join a monastery and become a monk or a monk going out to beg, at least you'd have food on the table. And he failed. Okay, and and eventually the monastery itself closed down, and that's how dire the situation was in its time. It makes me think a little bit about Ma Yun or Jack Ma's career, right? He keeps saying how many times he's failed. And that was the early years of Zhu Yuanzhang's life. Then he joined one of the militant groups, the bandits, and there were many in China coagulating to become dominant in the different places. And eventually, the bandit group that he belonged to, the Red Turbans, became a force in their own right and gave him the stage on which he could then go up north and claim the dynasty or the kingdom for himself. And when I think about the history of his life, that in one lifetime you can start from poverty to becoming emperor, and in the process do a whole range of different things, is breathtaking, right? And so when I think about Zhu Yuanzhang's life story, I actually know people in modern day China who have been through a similar experience. I'm thinking of senior people in government, in industry, in business, who started life during the Cultural Revolution. They were farmers. They were sent out into the villages to work, and they weren't able to finish their school and all of that. And then after the Cultural Revolution, they become, in one case that I'm thinking about, became an academic. And then he joined a bank. And then he became the chairman of the bank. And then he led the world's largest IPO of a bank ever. So these are larger than life stories. It was the story of Zhu Yuanzhang, and it's the story of many of the business leaders in China today. Okay, that's number one. Number two is the speed with which the country was able to, grow and become a force to be reckoned with in the early years of the Ming Dynasty. So Zhu Yuanzhang ruled for about 30 years from the time he finally toppled the Yuan dynasty when he was 40 years old, and he lived till 71. So there was 30 full years of ruling the country. And in that time, he put in place the social infrastructure. He rearranged the order of the Confucianist scholar, the military, and the trader, and he gave a lot of bandwidth to the traders to help create wealth in the country. In fact, if you come to Nanjing today, you will see that there are many huge gardens, the history of which used to belong or were part of the estate of some of these wealthy traders. And then education and property rights for the farmers and all of that. And later, when his son took over, now in between there was his grandson, and I'll come to that in a second, but his son spent another 22 years or so taking China to a whole new height. And then, guess what? That's the same story that's repeated today, right? From the end of the Cultural Revolution in 1976 to what China is today, is about 28 to 38 years in a time span. It's a breathtaking time span. So there's something about this country and about this society, and maybe civilizational, okay, as some people say, that lends itself to when this country is organized. It is a force to be reckoned with. Okay, and for that matter, I guess it's any country that's organized, but more this country than almost any other country in the world. And the parallel between the early days of the Ming Empire and what China is today, it's somewhat of the same phases. So Zhu Yuanzhang invested in the social infrastructure, and his son invested a lot in the physical infrastructure. So Zhu Ti, the son who eventually took over, built the Grand Canal, extended it and completed it, built the extra portion of the Great Wall, built the Forbidden City and all that we see in Beijing today, and a whole range of infrastructure. Probably the world's biggest state sponsored infrastructure project of any civilization or of any country in that period. And then when I think about what China has gone through recently, we need to remember that the first 14 years or so after the Cultural Revolution, China was not overtly promoting itself. It was silently working out and investing in things like universal education, literacy, right? 98% of Chinese are literate, as opposed to many of the other developing countries that are promising to even today. And then nutrition, for kids to make sure that they develop fully. And that was the first 14 years before China joined the WTO. And when China joined the WTO and then became a technology behemoth, it had a population that could absorb a lot of these technologies because they were essentially educated, literate, and healthy. And that set the stage from 2001, about that time, to about 2014. And that's about another 14 years where China's GDP grew relentlessly. And then it started to soften as any GDP should. But, that's the parallel with what happened in the Ming Dynasty. The third thing about the Ming Dynasty, which I see replicated today, is the cosmopolitan nature of China. And here, there is a personality that I've been incredibly taken by, the Admiral Zheng He. Right? Now, the big thing about Admiral Zheng He was that he is not ethnic Chinese. His roots are Turkish. His great-grandfather, 4 times removed, is buried in Yunnan right now. Okay, and sometimes I have this debate with my Chinese friends that Zheng He was actually Hui Chinese. He wasn't. He was actually ethnically different. The big question is, what was it about somebody who was not ethnic Chinese that the Yongle Emperor Chu Ti, the son of Zhu Yuanzhang, trusted? Right? And so I was always intrigued about that. And it's only when you travel in this part of the country that you realize that at least 4 of the major cities in that time were heavy with Muslim populations. Quanzhou, Hangzhou, Yangzhou, and Guangzhou had a very strong Muslim population. And Quanzhou, to this day, there is a very nice museum in Quanzhou which has a whole range of tombstones from the Yuan Dynasty, which in themselves tell the story of who lived there, what was their jobs, who were they related to, and where exactly they lived, what did they do, and all of that. So just reading tombstones can tell you the history of a people. And the big thing is, why did the emperor choose a Muslim to make those 7 journeys that we now know a lot about? I had explored various theories. And one more thing is this, that in Quanzhou, 2 holy men, so to speak, Muslim holy men from the 900 AD, that was about 200 years after Islam was formed, who are buried there, okay, and who are considered to be sages. And even Zheng He, before he started his first journey started in Suzhou, but he stopped by Quanzhou to be able to pay homage to these 2 saints before he started his journey. And also, one of the reasons I think that the Admiral Zheng He went all the way to Arabia was because he wanted very much to do his Hajj, which he did. And because his family is very proud of having completed the Hajj. So there's a whole element in there that is very interesting. But what I'm driving to here is that China was incredibly cosmopolitan. And having grown up with Chinese people, having gone to school with Chinese friends outside of China, and then now doing a lot of business in China, I can see this country or this civilization being inclusive and being cosmopolitan more than what it is today. It has the ingredients for it. The fourth thing that I learned from the Ming Dynasty, the early years of the Ming Dynasty, is the issue of governance. And this is a difficult one because having built a country so strong through sheer hard work, Zhu Yuanzhang made a decision which is debatable in that he passed on the empire to his grandson, the son of his oldest son who had predeceased him. He had died earlier. And it's perfectly understandable. But the grandson sort of raised the ire of all his uncles, and the fourth uncle, who is the most capable militarily and who had actually secured the northern part of China, Beijing and Yunnan for his father, became very angry and came after his nephew, and there was civil war, and the nephew was ousted. And there was a belief that the nephew was killed, but they never found his body. So there's another rumor going around that the reason the Chuti, the Yongle emperor, set out Zheng He's voyages was because he wanted to look for his nephew, who had been emperor for 4 years, and to have him finally killed so that he won't have a usurper later on. Now, the governance issues are very interesting, and there are governance issues in China today. And I'll just leave it at that. That there are issues that way. But the interesting thing about governance issues is that it didn't derail the progress of the country. Okay, so Chuti still had 22 good years to take the country to another level. The fifth parallel that I see between the early years of the Ming Dynasty and today is the cultural desire in Chinese civilization to earn the respect of all of its neighbors and all of the other countries in the world. Face is a very important thing in China, but far more than that. And China pays a price for that respect. And it paid a price during Chuti's time, and it still pays a price today. In Chuti's time, when you think of Zheng He's voyages, 7 of them, the first 5 depleted the national treasury, the palace treasury. Why? Because the flotilla would go out there. He provided military assistance for some of the empires that needed that, but also he was carrying incredible amounts of gifts, pottery, silk, women as gifts to the sultans and so on, right? And in fact, there is this story where the third sultan of Malacca, Muzaffar Shah, 15 years into his rule, I guess he was getting bored, so he accepted an invitation to go to Beijing, and Chuti had moved the capital from Nanjing to Beijing by that time. And he spent almost a year in Beijing, right? Until the emperor had to write him a note and say, don't you think it's time for you to go back? And in that way, China gave a lot. When you think about the Ming Dynasty vases, which were perfected during the Song Dynasty, where the blue color on the vase or pottery comes from the Middle East. The quality of the vases or the pottery had gone up incredibly, but when the state gives that away as a gift to other states in that time, it incurs an incredible expense. In fact, I even think there are ships in Southeast Asia that have sunk. When you pull it up, you see that they are Chinese junks with 60,000, pottery, being exported, whether for sale or as gifts. I think that even as a manufacturing country at that time, given that pottery was the most important export, China was almost subsidizing and flooding the market with an oversupply. Okay, so just think about it today. I see parallels there. In the same way, when I think about the Belt and Road Program, I've known the Belt and Road Program long before it was called Belt and Road in 2014 or so. I've had friends whose parents were working in Africa all the time that they were growing up, right into the 2000s. So originally, the Belt and Road Program was a economic reallocation of capital and human capital as well. Many of the workers who went out to look for jobs in the most difficult places in the world, and I meet them even to this day, were from provinces like Guizhou, from Gansu, from Guangxi, and then even from Anhui, from the western provinces or the central and off-central western provinces, which were poverty-stricken. And even if the banks lent into the provinces, they would not be able to, get their returns. And so a lot of the entrepreneurs in these provinces went out and looked for projects outside of the country. And then it became the Belt and Road Program. It became nationalized, it became state to state, it became very infrastructure driven. And in the same way that Zheng He's 7 voyages were a national project, by the time he did his 6th voyage, the palace had already decided that it was becoming bankrupt. And all that China had at that time during the Ming Dynasty to show that it was, that it gained any benefit from those journeys was a giraffe in the Forbidden City. And that was really sad, right? Now, in the same way today, when I think about the money that's going out to fund a lot of the infrastructure projects in Africa, well, they're not coming back. The money is not coming back. And the Americans had learned this in the 1970s. Citibank, JP Morgan were lending to South America, and Walter Wriston himself said that that countries don't default until they did, and countries will default, and it will be a price that China will have to pay. So these are the 5 thoughts that I have at the back of my mind, and they are. I'm sharing that with you because as I process Chinese history, I see parallels. But of course, realities would be different. Today's reality in China is incredibly different. The economists whom I know, they are thinking on monetary policy and fiscal policies incredibly well developed. So, there are mistakes that China will not make. But what's fascinating is that when you understand from history the emotional and psychological essence of a people, you are able to add that to your understanding of where they would go with it. So with those thoughts in my head, bye for now, and I am very curious as to what people think.